Hi, I'm Jennifer, an MCAT teacher and content creator here at Kaplan. In this video, Kevin, one of our expert instructors, will take you through what we've identified as one of the toughest passages from Kaplan's free MCAT practice test. This test was designed by Kaplan's question writers and validated by Kaplan's psychometrics team to be as representative of the actual MCAT as possible, so you know you're getting a great representation of what you will see on test day. This passage from the Psych-Soc section focuses on experiments investigating the serial position effect. Follow along to see how Kevin attacks this passage using Kaplan's passage and question strategy.
A quick glance at the passage shows me this is experimental, and while not necessarily the most informative in this case, I often recommend looking at the graphs and tables first to get an idea of what the passage is about and what is going to be measured. Here we can see the researchers are measuring recall of words in a sequence, so it sounds like the serial positioning effect. And the first sentence confirms my suspicions. Whenever a new term is given and defined in text, it's a great idea to pay special attention to it, especially if you've never seen or heard that term before. Serial position effect explains that recall of items in a list varies based on the item's position in that list. This is where things like recency and primacy come into play, and I expect we'll talk about those terms later in this passage. In this section, the experiment is being introduced. A list of words is read to a group of participants who are tasked with remembering as many words as possible, a pretty standard experiment for testing this type of recall. As a prize, the winner of this little game gets a gift certificate. The sentence seems a little out of place at first, but rather than brush it off as just a small detail, realize that this is a behavioral science section of the MCAT, so this might be priming us for some questions about motivations. And last but not least, more details on the experiment. Words were shown for 2 seconds each, and the participants wrote down the words they remembered in order. Now, you probably have a pretty good idea of what the results will look like if you've ever tried to memorize a list before. So let's turn to the results and see if that matches. Of note, the middle of the list has pretty poor recall. It averages about 10% accuracy, while the beginning and end have a much better accuracy. This is the primacy and recency effects that I mentioned earlier, and I'm willing to bet that we'll be asked about it later. In fact, if you have a graph, table, or figure, or anything like that on the MCAT passages, you can expect to be asked something about it. So practicing with interpreting data now will definitely pay off in the long run. And of course, no good experiment is going to end so quickly. Level 2 ramps up the difficulty with 40 words instead of 15. All other aspects of the experiment remain pretty much unchanged. In turning the experiment up from intermediate to hard mode, the final step involves another set of 40 words, but this time given a brief 30-second delay before assessing their recall. Now let's check the results to see who wins that gift card. Graphs here with multiple data sets will appear with a small legend nearby. And if there isn't one, be sure to read the caption to discern exactly which line corresponds to which data set. I cannot overstate the importance of reading both the labels on the graph and the caption, as there's often some hidden information that's going to be necessary for correct analysis. Now, when comparing data sets, look for the differences. Here, both sets start pretty strong and fall off quickly, back to that same 10% accuracy or so that we saw with the smaller set of only 15 words. But the immediate recall improves drastically towards the end, while the delayed recall never really recovers. I chose to interrogate for this passage, but many times students find it helpful to write notes or highlight the passage, even when using an interrogation method. And that's the beauty of the Kaplan strategies. You can stick to one or mix and match whatever works for the best effectiveness for you. Ultimately, knowing the results and quickly being able to compare the differences will help you score points on test day. The question tasks us with extrapolating the data to a new scenario, ideally through any identifiable trends that are in the passage already. Both figures from the passage show most of the middle items at approximately a 10% accuracy, give or take a few points. Notice that as more words are added in sequence, the lower the average recall accuracy becomes. The question asks about a sample with 100 words. That's over twice the amount of data in our original set, which already has a majority 10% accuracy. It's reasonable to assume, then, that with a longer sequence, the accuracy will only get worse. A 10% accuracy means a 90% error rate. making D the correct answer. Anything less would imply that the recall accuracy actually improves with more words in the sequence. This is a question that I was somewhat able to predict by using the Kaplan active reading strategy. You remember that line from the passage that didn't quite seem to fit? The one on screen here? The winner of the experiment is given an object of monetary value, the gift card. Now, money is a tangible external reward and is a great motivator for people to do a lot of things, like show up and go to work every day. So this can be rephrased to an external motivation, whether it is tangible or intangible, is what kind of motivator? And that can only match one answer, an extrinsic motivator. However, during your review process, it's still good practice to review all the answers and terms presented so that you can better address similar questions in the future. Intrinsic motivators are internal, things that drive you, like ambition, desire to succeed, or satiate your curiosity. Being given a gift card is not something that comes from within. Likewise, achievement, like ambition and drive to succeed, is also an internal motivator. Be careful with this one, though. Wanting to achieve is internal, and this is different than receiving an award for your achievement, because the award itself is the external motivator. And a secondary motivator is something that does not fulfill a primary need, like water, food, shelter, but one that fulfills a societal need. Wanting to be a rock star is a good example of a secondary motivation. This question creates a new scenario where the participants are asked to recall the words "have short-term memory loss." Without more information, this could be anything, so more information can likely be found in the experiment itself. So let's go back to the graph. I brought figure 2 up on screen so we can make some predictions. The dataset with the delayed recall strikes me as pretty interesting here. Here, the participants had a brief delay before being asked to recite something that happened only a short time ago. And that showed a significant decline in the words at the end of the sequence, which indicates that recall of the last few words in the sequence is associated with your short-term memory. However, the words that come first in the sequence still had pretty decent recall. A glance at the answer choices shows us we need to make a distinction between the primacy and the recency effect. I mentioned primacy and recency effect a few times during the passage, and now here it is in the question, and it cannot be answered properly without knowing the definition of these terms. Primacy effect describes the ability to better recall items that came first in the sequence, and the recency effect is the ability to recall the most recent items, the ones that came last in the sequence. A potential rephrase for this question is which effect remained in the delayed recall experiment. The data shows that the recency effect was practically non-existent in the delayed set, but the primacy effect remained. So, the primacy effect would be the one that is not as affected by short-term memory loss. Another common question type in the behavioral science section is that of research design. Here, they are simply asking, do you know what an independent variable is and how to identify one? An independent variable is one that is controlled or manipulated by the researcher. Typically, it's assigned to the x-axis on a graph, while the y-axis is reserved for the dependent variable. This is the results of the experiment or the thing that is being measured. We can certainly just read through the answer choices and determine what would be something that a researcher controls, but why not use the graph and read the x-axis? This points us directly to the answer. The word within the sequence matches B, the position of the words in the set. Likely the most common wrong answer choice is A, the number of words in the set. While this is something that was set by the researchers, it's not the variable being examined. In order for this to be an independent variable, we would have to compare several sequences with varying numbers of words in the set. This scenario only had one set with 40 words in the set.